Delighted to welcome the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps to the show right now. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. Well, lots of big announcements from the Prime Minister yesterday in terms of moving out of lockdown, tier restrictions. Still waiting to find out which tiers we're all in and what's happening over Christmas. But there's one specific major announcement, and that regarding the test to release. And this is allowing international travel once again. Can you explain how it's going to work?
Yeah, really simple. At the moment, if you travel from an area, a country which is not in the travel corridor, these are the things which change every week. They can be difficult to predict. Then at the moment, you have to quarantine for 14 days when you get home. What this means now is that after 5 days, you'll be able to take an authorised private test. And in doing so, if it's negative, you can be released there and then.
And obviously, this is going to make a really big difference. People who've got family overseas, family and around. But a lot of people are wondering, well, how are we talking about this happening mid-December in terms of people travelling in and out of the country when large swathes of the country may well be in Tier 3, which tells us to avoid travelling out of Tier 3, and indeed in Tier 2 and Tier 1 telling you not to travel into Tier 3 either. So you're allowed to travel internationally, but not around your own country?
So essentially, if you are travelling in a way that's not going to sort of endanger other people, as it were, you can do that. Obviously, if you do then travel, when you get back, you're going to have to either quarantine for 14 days or have a test, so you won't be sort of further endangering the area in which you live. We do ask people to be sensible with it, and we are also asking people to check very carefully where you're going to, because oftentimes you'll find there are restrictions in the country or the region that you're going to the other end as well. So you're right, it's not totally straightforward. You've got to think this through before you book and you go. But there aren't restrictions per se.
Okay, now people who are paying for getting these tests, they're going to pay for them themselves. It's not going to add an extra burden on the taxpayer. A lot of these tests offer more than £100. But we know that the cost of test and trace very quietly slipped out yesterday, has now gone up from 12 billion to 22 billion pounds. What on earth has that been spent on?
Yeah, I think we actually put some more money into it. So this is money projected to go forward. And look, we know that the best chances we have of defeating this virus are being able to clamp it down by testing, knowing where it occurs, ensuring people self-isolate, or increasingly now looking at things like the lateral testing. And that's where some of this money will go to. Lateral testing is these very fast tests that give you, within 30 minutes your reply. So people holds out the hope that people will be able to go about their normal lives as long as they've taken a test in the morning. And then, of course, the really great news of the vaccines coming down the line as well. But we have to assume in the meantime, we need to do all these other things to keep things under control.
We have a lot of problems, though, with the rolling out of mass testing to allow people to have what is effectively a freedom pass to go about their daily business. Given that the vast majority of people do not have COVID and never have even at the peak, we're in a bizarre situation where we're going to be using tests, spending billions and billions and billions on tests on perfectly healthy people to find out that they are indeed perfectly healthy to go about their normal lives. Given the sums of money involved, why not? If we've got that sort of money grows on trees. It doesn't. Every single penny we spend on one thing is a penny we don't have to spend on other things, or it's extra tax, extra borrowing, that again, future spending. Is that really a good way to spend what is effectively the health budget? Would there not be much better ways of spending that money that would save far, far, far more lives?
Well, one of the things we know about this disease is that, unfortunately, the reason it spreads so viciously is a lot of people who are asymptomatic. They don't know that they are carrying it around are actually spreading it. So we do need to find out who those people are in order to stop the spread.
But actually, that has actually been debunked since. Even Fauci in the United States was clear about that earlier on in the year. And it's now a recent study published in Nature, peer-reviewed study in one of the world's renowned medical journals, after a study of 10 million people in China, has found that actually some pre-symptomatic people, for a couple of days before they actually come down with the virus, can be transmitting the virus. But actually, asymptomatic transmission is virtually zero.
Well, I think would be.
I'm sorry to quote evidence. I know the government's not big on evidence, but
well, there's a little bit unfair. We do spend a huge amount of time with our chief medical officers and scientific advisors and SAGE and all
how are those 4,000 deaths a day going, by the way?
And I should point out, Julia, that you'll always find one scientist who thinks this and another scientist who thinks something.
No. This isn't thinking. This isn't opinion. I'm quoting a major study that's been published in a world-renowned peer-reviewed scientific journal.
Yeah, but I think the simple point I make is I don't think anyone would argue is that if we knew everybody who was COVID positive, albeit that you make the sensible point about a period when people might transmit before they know they've got it themselves. But if you did know everybody and you were able to self-isolate those people, of course we would be in a much better position. In fact, we know that's how to deal with it. So the cost of not dealing with COVID, I would suggest, is so much higher than
no one is suggesting not dealing with COVID, and no one's suggesting, as the Prime Minister suggested, let it.
Well, let me try it in a different way. Actually, let's look at the Liverpool example, where it will have been, I think it's fair to say, a combination of different things. They've had a strict Tier 3 lockdown before going into the main lockdown, but they've also had mass testing, and there's some evidence that these lateral flow tests have really helped, that it's helping to identify people, and that's helping to keep a lid on the disease. So I think very good example in Liverpool. Let's see what happens as we expand that program.
Except infection rates were already going down in Liverpool even before they went into Tier 3 and even before this testing started. Again, I'm sorry to throw evidence at you. I know this is not popular these days, but those are simple facts.
I love looking at the evidence. It's absolutely what we should be doing. But I don't think anyone can argue that having a mass test program, we can already do 538,000 tests capacity a day, and being able to double that up again, which is our plan before even the lateral flow test. I don't think anyone can say that's a bad thing. If nothing else, we'll be able to use it to test for other diseases domestically in the future, rather than having to.
That's something of a concern. People are worried. Let me ask you. We're talking about this with Ian Duncan-Smith, who worked in government for many years, of course, as Work and Pensions Secretary, and he was very, very clear that whenever there's any major decision in government, particularly when it costs billions and billions of pounds and has major effects, there is always a cost-benefit analysis carried out. There is always an impact assessment. It's required by the Treasury if there's a huge cost. What do you think this policy will achieve? What will be the cost? What will be the benefits? Mark Harper, a Tory MP, one of your colleagues on the backbench, has asked the Prime Minister yesterday for what was the impact of each measure in each tier on COVID and the impact of each measure in each tier in terms of on people's lives and on businesses. Are you aware of that cost-benefit analysis, and is the government going to publish it before the vote in the House of Commons on these tier restrictions next week?
Yeah, one of the reasons we've made the tier restriction vote next week is it will be after a huge data dump of a lot of analysis, which will take place tomorrow as part of the spending review. So actually all of that work's been worked up in government over the last few weeks with the spending review. The information will be out there and people will be able to come, MPs will be able to come to their own assessment on it before the House of Commons decides whether to.
There'll be clear evidence of what each so closing the pubs at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. That will be the expected effect on COVID will be known, and the expected loss of life and loss of the economic effects, that will be known, will it?
I totally understand the desire for complete clarity, but I have to tell you that a lot of these measures cross over. So you will find that one measure and another measure, and I just gave the example in Liverpool. What happens in those areas is that it may be that it was a severe Tier 3 lockdown. It may be it was happening before. It may be that the mass tests were involved. You can't put an exact number to each of those things, but we are getting better at understanding the things that really help, which is why we're better at dealing with this now than we were at the beginning of the crisis.
Grant Shapps, I know we've got to leave it there. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, that you've got another interview to get to. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.